The first step in shooting any film is coming up with an idea. An idea that's worth the time, the labor, the heartbreak that goes into making an amazing movie. So, a couple things that I think are important. One, it's an idea that's important to you, something that you can commit to. And then two, it's marketable. And when you're first starting out as a filmmaker, point two is always more important than point number one. And that might sound like heresy, but it's not being a sellout. As much as the artist in us doesn't like it, we've got to be strategic when we're starting out as filmmakers. And even once we're established, we have to be strategic. It's the cursed business side of all this. But if we want to keep making movies, we've got to make money making movies eventually. And to do that, we have to be strategic. So we'll talk more about that later. First, let's talk about 4 crucial checkpoints that you should run any idea through before you commit to making it into a movie. 1, is the idea unique? 2, do you have the budget? 3, premise and genre. And 4, who's the audience? Is your idea unique? Maybe you already have an idea coming into Write and Direct. Guess what? It's already been done. Find any studio executive, and I've witnessed this, start pitching them your stuff, your best ideas, and they're going to say, I've already heard it. It's already been done. Someone else is already working on that, etc. But even though most ideas have been done in some shape or form, you can still take an idea that you have and put your own unique twist on that idea. Ron Howard says filmmaking is about taking something old and combining it with something new. I remember back when the first Avatar came out, my wife and I watched it in the theater and loved the movie, and we were wearing the 3D glasses and blown away. But at the end, it struck me as a retelling of The Last Samurai. So does that mean that James Cameron copied Edward Zwick's The Last Samurai? Of course not. He just, The Last Samurai is a retelling of another story similar to it. It's something old combined with something new. Take The Matrix. The Matrix won a lot of awards, the first one. It was an amazing film. I went to the theater. It sounds crazy, but I went to the theater 18 times to watch that movie. But anyway, so The Matrix, it's about a story about mankind making machines and the machines then trying to take over mankind. Well, speaking of James Cameron, didn't he already do that like in 1984 with The Terminator? So as you can see, you can do the same ideas over and over. They just have to have your own unique take. Do you have the budget? Most of the scripts I've written, including the feature-length scripts I've written to date, were all written with budget in mind. Studios seem to have unlimited amounts of cash to vaporize at will, so it doesn't affect them as much as it does us. I mean, a prime lens used on a studio shoot for their cinema cameras, one prime lens, which they don't just use one, costs more than all my gear combined. But I think limitations are a parent of creativity. So embrace your limitations. And your job right now is to come up with an idea that you can execute on with the resources you have available to you. So, do you live in the country? Do you live in the city? Maybe your dad's a mechanic, so you have access to a garage with tools. That's amazing production value. Use that. Maybe all you have access to is an apartment or a kitchen. Whatever it is, take advantage of it. First film, or one of the first short films I ever worked on with some friends was, all we had access to was our apartments, and then my friend had a cat. My friend Jim Coretta, his cat Snowball, who has since passed. But anyway, so that's what we did. And we made a short film with what we had access to. And guess what? It was free. And, for all intents and purposes, it worked. So think about what you have access to and don't take anything for granted. One of the things we always do as humans is take what we know, what we have access to, who we're with, all that stuff. It's so easy to take for granted. So think about that. Premise and genre. So along with a unique idea and something that you can execute on right now with Write and Direct training, you've got to come up with your premise and your genre. So what is premise? It's what your film's about, kind of at a surface level. It's what would sell movie tickets if you were sending it to the theater. Like the basic premise of Jurassic Park could be a scientist discovers that he can create or recreate dinosaurs based on DNA from mosquito blood, and he decides to build an amusement park which turns into a Jurassic hunting ground. rough premise, but you get the idea. Now, sometimes your premise and your idea will be kind of one and the same, while other times the idea you want to talk about or write a story about needs a premise to mirror that or explain it, kind of like an analogy of your thoughts. For example, let's say something that's important to you is trusting friends, trusting family, trusting people who are close to you regardless, even when it's tough. And let's say the only thing you have access to is your home and a cat named Snowball. So what story could you tell that gets that idea across? Well, a general premise could be a man tries to sleep on a night right before his first day at a big job, and he has to trust his cat who continues to wake him up because someone's trying to break into the house and rob him. So it's very basic, but that would work with what you have access to. So once you come up with an idea, a budget, and a premise, then you have to anchor it all in a genre. So we all get genre in a general sense, right? Sci-fi, horror, action, comedy, drama. Did I say drama? The reason you have to anchor your idea in a genre is because it dictates how you tell your story. Take the cat example. Let's say you wanted it to be a comedy. That might dictate who you cast, and it'll dictate everything that happens. But let's say you wanted to make a horror with that same premise, that same idea. It would radically change how it's told. Let's look at a couple studio films that have very similar premise, but are radically different. A home is taken over by thieves during Christmas, and a boy must figure out how to beat them single-handedly. What's that? Home Alone, right? And Home Alone is a comedy. Now let's look at another premise. An office building is taken over by thieves during Christmas, and a lone cop must figure out how to beat them single-handedly. Well, that's Die Hard, and Die Hard is a rated R action film. Completely different than Home Alone, but notice the premise of these two films is almost identical. Genre makes them different. Genre dictates how they're told. If at the end of Home Alone, the kid pulled out a 9mm and started blowing people away, well, the audience would roll into confusion, and you never want to confuse your audience. So you have to stick to the genre you choose to execute in. Okay, next. As I've already mentioned, when you first start out as a filmmaker, you must execute on commercially viable projects. Let me say it this way. Audience building projects. This advice could save your career. I've personally seen this happen before. A new talented filmmaker will spend a lot of money and a lot of time on an idea that's close to their heart, but at the end of the day, nobody else really cares that much. It's a harsh reality, but we have to be strategic. We have to focus on what people want to see and execute on that first so that we can have the freedom to do what we want. Spielberg said this about Jaws. The amount of success the film enjoyed just gave me final cut, gave me the chance to tell my own stories. Notice what he said. Gave me the chance to tell my own stories. So, as you consider an idea right now and stories to tell ongoing, you've got to think about what is either widely appealing or what has a very specific niche audience. Let's say right now you're involved in the Boy Scouts, or maybe your dad or your brother, your son are involved in the Boy Scouts. Well, that's an instant audience. If you made a comedy about the Boy Scouts, you would have a lot of people that would watch that right away. That's smart. But then also genre plays in, because if you made a horror film, just because it's about the Boy Scouts, well, can all the Boy Scouts watch a horror? Not so much. This is your first of many action steps with Write and Direct, because we are making a movie. I want you to decide on an idea that you can execute on while taking this training. What entertaining story can you tell with the locations and the things you have access to? As I said before, don't take what you have access to for granted. Build your idea and premise around what you have for free, or at least close to free. In fact, let's take Reckoning through the steps so you can see what I did. Number 1, is my idea unique? Someone standing up to an outlaw? Not unique. Someone's parents being gunned down in front of them? not unique either. Hello, Batman. But a young 7-year-old girl having to stand up to an outlaw that killed her parents, that's a unique spin that I haven't seen much, if at all. So my idea is combining something old with something new. That's a go. Do I have the budget? Well, we live in the mountains of North Carolina. So I decided to do a story with a period piece because we have a lot of old cabins around that I can use for free. People around here are extremely nice. So all I have to do is hire someone on Etsy to make to do some costuming, and that's not too pricey, so budget's a go. Premise and genre. So my idea and premise are kind of hand in hand. I wanted to do a period piece, and I wanted to talk about a girl having the guts to stand up to an outlaw. So as far as genre, that idea to me just fits well with a thriller. I like executing on thrillers. It's a good audience. People like to watch those. So premise and genre are a go. Audience. So like I just said, the audience for thrillers is decent. The audience for a girl, wanting to see a girl stand up to a guy, a mean, abusive guy, also very on topic. I also chose to set the story in Little Cataloochee, which is a town that used to exist in North Carolina before the U.S. made it part of the national forest and forced everyone to leave. And that town still has a following because the residents, or the kids that used to have parents and grandparents that lived there back in the day, they still meet and have reunions. And so setting my story in Little Cataloochee was a marketing move to not only have a cool place to tell my story, but maybe garner some audience attention. Now it's your turn. Jot down some ideas and, maybe run them by your friends. Definitely run them through all these steps. And don't settle on the first idea that comes to your head. I mean, that might be the best idea, but one of the most difficult things about storytelling is forcing yourself to not be mentally lazy. So even though your initial thoughts and ideas might be gold, just take the time to make sure. And if you want help with ideas, post in the community. Tell everyone what you have access to and see what people say. That's a great way to come up with fresh ideas. So once you have your idea and your premise and your genre, you're ready to embark on learning the craft of storytelling.